The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Hello and welcome to The Best in the World with Richard Parr. This week I spoke to Lenny Krayzelburg, the four-time Olympic gold medalist. He won 3 golds in swimming at the 2000 Sydney Olympics and then another gold in Athens in 2004. It's a fantastic chat with the CEO of the Krayzelburg Swim Academy, and we talk about a whole range of topics on this week's podcast. It includes how Lenny adjusted from moving from living in the Ukraine and being brought up there to living in the United States and California. He talks about how working with Mark Schubert really changed his mindset and made him become the best in the world at what he does. He also talks about his training. He talks about overtraining, in fact, and we talk about his journey throughout his swimming career and his life now as a businessman. It's a really good chat with Lenny. It's coming up in just a few moments, but first I want to say about Audible. Audible is one of the leading suppliers of audiobooks in the world. They've got 180,000 titles to choose from, and it can be in a whole range of topics. It could be sport, it could be business, it could be fiction, anything you like, and Audible should have it at audible.com. And in fact, if you want to try out their service for free, yes, for free, you can do it by going to audibletrial.com/best. That's audibletrial.com/best, and that will give you a chance to check out their service for free for 30 days, and that includes one free download. So you can go and do that and check it out for yourself. Go and have a look at it. That's audibletrial.com/best. All right, it's time for us to learn from the very best. It's time for our interview with Lenny Krayzelburg.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Lenny Krayzelburg, welcome to The Best in the World with Richard Parr, 4-time Olympic gold medalist in swimming. It's so great to have you on the program. Of course, that is a while ago now, back in the early 2000s. It's 2017 right now. Why don't we just update our listeners into what you're up to at the moment?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to, share my story. Yes, it has been quite some time since, of course, the success in Sydney in 2000 and then coming back to Athens in 2004. And since my retirement right after Athens, I got into a business of swimming schools, learn to swim academies for kids. Where we teach mostly water safety. Our primary focus is on water safety rather than competitive swimming. And I've been pretty intimately involved in that for the past 12 years since retiring. And, today that really does occupy most of my, professional, career, post-athletic career life.
So what exactly are you doing on a day-to-day basis? Are you teaching the kids the water safety, or as I've seen, you've got lots of academies all across the state. So is it more of an administrational role, or are you kind of looking after the whole business? Or
Exactly. I'm more overseeing as a CEO, overseeing the business, overseeing all of our facilities. We have locations in LA that I own, and then I now franchise our concept to other locations around the country, as you mentioned. But really involved more from a bigger picture on continue to grow the business, continue to perfect what we're currently doing, looking for new ways to be better at what we do. And I have about in Los Angeles have a staff of about 90 administrative plus swim instructors that I'm keeping a pretty close tabs on. So it definitely keeps me pretty busy on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. It sounds tiring. Now, you mentioned about the business growing. Do you set goals, and how regularly?
Well, of course. I said, look, every year we really set out goals in terms of what we want to accomplish in the upcoming year, and really trying to stick to those goals and see how close we can come to fulfilling them. That really goes back to my professional career as a swimmer, and always having goals set for myself, whether it would be a short-term goal of what I wanted to accomplish during a particular season or during a particular, maybe swim competition, and then obviously building on that to bigger goals, which, for me was always, international competitions and ultimately, all the way up to the Olympic Games.
Yeah, that's where I was leading to, the comparison of what you're doing now to what you were doing back then. And we'll go into more of these things in a little bit more detail. But are there some things which you do in this new role, in this new position, which, other than goal setting, that you really learn as a swimmer, which maybe people who aren't professional athletes or professional swimmers might not have that skill set from?
What I've learned a lot is the success of my business today depends a lot on the people that I work with, or that work for me. Valuing their opinion, their experience, letting their voice be heard is really important for me. I want them to always feel comfortable coming to me and speaking their mind, and knowing that they will have my full attention, and we will have a healthy conversation and really give a consideration whatever ideas or suggestions they might have. That goes very similar to, when I was an athlete competing. I've always had tremendous respect for my coaches. I mean, it goes back from when I was a kid. For me, the coach was the authority. Whether sometimes I agreed or disagreed with a certain philosophy or certain training sets or approach, I was always very professional about it, and always understood the part of respecting the coach and acknowledging the fact that he had my best intentions for me. And same thing with with my teammates that I've always trained for. I understood that I can only be as good as the people that are around me that were pushing me on an every single day basis. And although might have been a little bit more talented they were and achieved greater success than many of the teammates that I trained with, nonetheless, they went through the same grind of 4, 5, 6 hours a day of just intense training, fulfilling their own goals for themselves, but ultimately, pushing me to the levels that I was able to achieve.
Was there any one teammate or perhaps a rival which you think pushed you your hardest?
Yes, absolutely. Brad Bridgewater. I don't know if that name rings a bell, but he was an Olympic gold medalist in 1996 in 200 backstroke. So we obviously swam the same event, and we trained together from about 1995 to 2000. So obviously having Brad training with me, twice a day for 5 years was an incredible opportunity to basically race every single day with the best in the world. And I'm saying literally best in the world. So we brought the best in each other, and, I couldn't have asked for anything more. Because by the time I would get to competitions, I knew how to deal with it because I dealt with it every single day in training.
Do you think what you learned and you rubbed off there is similar to what Aaron Pearsall then did from you?
Well, with Aaron, I didn't really have much opportunity to train with him on an everyday basis. Aaron trained at a different club when he was still a teenager before college. He trained in Orange County, which was about an hour from where I was training at USC. And then he went on to Texas. But I would like to think that, Aaron being about 9 years younger than me, I know that he's always looked up to me and really studied the way I trained. And, any time that we were in training camps together, we definitely had a pretty good close bond. I guess the longest we've ever spent time was in a pre-Olympic camp in 2000 before Sydney, where we spent about a month together. So we did train quite a bit at that time. But that was really, as we were leading into Sydney, the training was a little bit different. There was a lot of taper down, so there wasn't as intense type of training where you really pushed each other in practice for long periods of time, the way I did it with Brad Bridgewater.
Okay, I look forward to talking a bit more in detail about your typical training day in a few minutes, but I'd like to kind of go back to the start now and talk a little bit about your early years. You've mentioned a few things there about your coaches and things like that, because you were born in the Ukraine, correct?
That's correct.
And
yes.
how was life there until you moved to the United States?
So I grew up in the city of Odessa in the Ukraine, and my father always wanted me to be an athlete. In fact, he really wanted me to be a soccer player, which was most popular sport in at that time Soviet Union. We're talking about late 70s, 80s, when I grew up in that country. So it was all still Soviet Union. And then at around age of 5, I was too young to do soccer, so he put me into swimming because that was really the only other sport where you can start at such a young age. And I took a liking to it, and was pretty good at it. And then by the time I was 9 years old, I started 4th grade. We're talking still the old Soviet sports system, where you were selected at a certain age if they saw some talent or some potential in you. And I was selected at that time into a special swim class, which was also my school class, where we spent a lot of time together, doing double practices, practice in the morning, going to school, and then another practice in the afternoon. So that was quite intense training for a 9-year-old. But that was part of the culture, and it was also really a privilege to be selected into this special group, and having an opportunity to be a focus of a club that really they thought that you had some potential. So for about 3 years before I moved we decided to move on to the United States. This was part of my life, and I still to this day attribute a lot of my success that I've achieved in the sport of swimming due to those early trainings in Soviet Union.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, looking back, you said they were quite a lot for a 9-year-old, but they were kind of what made you a little bit, wasn't it? So would you still recommend that for any young 9-year-old now who's pretty good at swimming and wants to be an Olympic champion, or is there another method, do you think?
No, I'll be honest with you. I would not recommend at such an early age. I think you're asking for a burnout, and experience was a perfect example of that. Is because I think we started out with about 35 kids. By the time I left the United States at the age of 12, 13, we only had about 7 that were still continuing to swim. So most other kids just quit because it was just too intense. I think for me, coming to the United States and trying to adjust to a new culture, new language, I didn't really train as much as I was used to back in Soviet Union. So I think that helped me to stay in the sport and not give up on it. But I will tell you though, what I got the most out of it, that I've always carried through my whole career, is that the belief and understanding that if you wanted to be successful at something, that it was going to take tremendous amounts of hard work and dedication, and there was simply no shortcuts to achieving, greatness in the sport, whatever sport that might be. For me, obviously, it was swimming.
And obviously all that hard work eventually paid off. So you moved at the age of 13 to the United States. You mentioned the language, you mentioned the culture. How easy or difficult, well, you've said how difficult, just how difficult was it, that adjustment? What were the things? Was it just a strange place? And how long did it take you to finally get up to speed and feel comfortable?
Yeah, it was definitely a tough transition. Obviously, I was coming from a very sheltered culture in Soviet Union to a pretty, wide open liberal society in the United States, and it was an eye-opening experience. not knowing the language is really hard. Also seeing, I have a very close family. My parents and I had have a younger sister, and just seeing the challenges my parents were going through, just adjusting to living in America. We moved to Los Angeles, and being able to find jobs, and it was tough watching them. For me, the language was the hardest. I remember for at least first year, just going to school, couldn't really understand much what the teachers were talking about. I remember also when I joined a swim club almost immediately when we settled in LA, and to this day I clearly remember just coming to practices, and after practice in the locker room, you're standing in the shower just kind of washing yourself and changing, and all these kids want to know about you, want to know how who you are, where you come from, and about learning about you. And yet I couldn't really communicate much to them because just didn't have much of a language knowledge at all. I would say it took me about 3 to 4 years to feel comfortable. That's really typical in terms of opening up and feeling confident about yourself and communicating with others. Although I started to understand the language earlier, to really feel comfortable talking, it definitely took at least 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, I lived in Madrid for about 9 months, and you start to understand things, but towards the end I could still only really order a beer and try to chat up a girl badly. So you're in the States, 3-4 years, you're finally settling, you're finally understanding the language. At which point did you then decide, or was there even a moment where swimming was going to be your future, that the Olympic Games were in your sight, that to become an Olympic world champion, world record holder was what you were going to aim to do?
Yeah, I guess around the age of 14, 15, so not too long after we settled in LA, I was definitely on the verge of quitting the sport. Main reason was, again, there was a struggle of adapting to living in a new country and learning the language, and not having friends, and also seeing my parents, the struggle they were going through. I didn't want to swim anymore. And really, my father talked me out of it. He was always a big sports fan, never an athlete himself, but he talked me out of it. And I remember him always telling me that, your coach in Soviet Union kept telling me that Lenny was born to be a swimmer and was born to be a backstroker. And those comments were always in the back of my mind. Now, just so you know, through my, I guess, teen years, I wasn't a standout swimmer. I was an average swimmer at best when the first few years in America, and so I really didn't see much potential, or even a chance, or even thought that I would ever get to this level that I eventually ended up getting to. I applied to a number of colleges after senior year in high school, and no one responded back just because I wasn't fast enough. So I had to go to a community college and basically just walk onto a community college swim team, because anyone could do that. You didn't need to be recruited for a community college. And really, maybe after my first year at the community college, that I swam pretty well, and my coach at the community college approached Mark Schubert, who was a head coach at USC, University of Southern California, and told him, Mark, I have this kid that's pretty talented but somewhat raw, and I would like you to take a look at him and see if he can train with you guys during the summertime. That was the summer of 1994. And Mark Schubert said, yes, of course, he can give it a try. And if he can, hang with our group, that would be nice. And the training group had Janet Evans, Greg Burgess, Brett Bridgewater. So I mean, you're talking world-class swimmers, and I was nowhere on that level at all. And just in 2 months that I trained, I was so excited for the opportunity to be in the same pool with these great swimmers, and I was given this chance to be part of this group that I took advantage of that opportunity. And for me, working hard and leaving it all in the pool was never a problem. And Mark Schubert really appreciated that and saw the work ethic and obviously saw the talents. And literally at the end of the summer, he sat me in his office and said, "Lenny, I would like to offer you a full scholarship to USC. And I really believe you can be the best backstroker in the world one day." And that was summer of '94. And that's when really my career my whole outlook and my career really changed when I heard him tell me that in his office.
Yeah, when he said that, did that just grow your confidence? Did you start to believe in it? Or was it now the hard work really starts because this can happen, I've got to put the work in and I've got all these great people around me and I can soak up this knowledge and get even better?
It was both. There's no doubt it was both, because I knew that there had to be tremendous amounts of work to get to the level these my teammates were at, but also Mark telling me that. I learned about Mark that summer, learned about his resume, knowing the multiple Olympic gold medalists that he coached going back to 1976, and being one of the best coaches in the world. And when someone like that tells you that you could be the best in the world, I think it's a tremendous confidence booster. I know for me it was, and no doubt played a crucial role in my success.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
We've got more from the Olympic swimming champion Lenny Krayzelburg in just a few moments, but I just want to tell you about Sportacino. Sportacino is our other sponsor of today's podcast. It is the daily video cast that I do on Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, and of course at sportacino.com. It covers all things related to sport. We're on every single weekday. Go and check it out, sportacino.com, for your daily sports digest. All right, let's return to my conversation with Lenny Krayzelburg.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
So let's talk about your training. Obviously, you got great success in 98 and 2000. What was a typical training day like in that era?
Well, training, obviously, we had a 2-hour morning practice. And then went back. Well, I was at the University of Southern California, still taking classes until 1998. So from 95 to 98, it was a 2-hour morning practice, then going to classes until about 2 p.m. and then coming back for another 2-hour practice in the water, and then an hour of dry land work. Once I graduated from the university in 98, then my focus was solely on training and preparation for Olympics in 2000. And although my training didn't necessarily change, we still kept that same schedule of 2 hours in the morning and then 3 in the afternoon. Just the ability to have more rest in between the practices, so that I could be more, productive and more efficient. Every practice was really important, and I think played a big role in my continued improvements.
I bet it was a relief when you had to stop studying and could have that bit of extra rest.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That extra that 2-hour rest after morning practice before afternoon was really, really helpful for me.
So tell us about the World Championships in 1998. You were the first swimmer in 12 years to win both the backstroke events. How was that?
Well, it was an exciting time. It was obviously my first biggest big meet. I mean, I went to 1997 Pan Pacific Championships in Japan, in Fukuoka, where I won both the 100 and 200 backstroke, and that was my first international competition, and I had a lot of confidence after that competition that I was starting to become the best in the world. And leading into Perth World Championships, I was definitely riding high and confident in myself and ability to win. And if you looked at the times, my times were not fast for that competition. In fact, they were probably one of the slower times for me in terms of winning an international meets. But I was still able to just build based on the confidence and the work I knew I put in. I was able to win both the 100 and 200, and really it was a great springboard for me going into basically the next couple of years into Sydney Olympics. I've always been I build my career on confidence. I'm a big believer on confidence. And I also feel that it snowballs based on continued success and improvements. So once, I won in Perth, it just gave me that much more confidence that I belong at that level. And if I continue to work hard and if I continue to train smart, that I believe I can continue to be the best in the world.
Yeah, because you did that the following year, didn't you, in 1999 when you broke 3 world records. You talked about confidence there, and that's very much the mental aspect of sport. Were there any kind of visualization skills that you were doing? Would you do any kind of meditation? Would you do any kind of pre-race ritual? What would kind of be going through your mind before big races like that?
Not much. Visualization, a little bit of it. More so in training, where I really, we had really hard, intense sets. We did a lot of quality, fast swimming. I imagined always that this is how it's going to feel during the competition. This is how I'm going to feel the last part of my race. So be ready for it. Expect it. Remember it, because what you want to do is when you're racing, you want to already know what to expect. And that's what it was for me. So a lot of the thinking and visualization for me personally was happening during practices, almost on a daily basis. And I really think that helped me, because when I got to competition, I didn't want to think. I didn't think I needed to, because all of that was done, beforehand. So I wanted to be as relaxed. I wanted my mind to be as free as possible, and just going and executing and doing what I knew how to do, because I practiced it for so long on a daily basis. So that was always my approach.
We had something similar when we spoke to the 2008 decathlon Olympic gold medalist Brian Clay. He was saying his training was so grueling that actually when it came to competition, it was easier than the training. Now, do you have any kind of unofficial world record times you may have done in the pool, Lenny?
No, never unofficial world record times, but I've done some times that at that time in 98, 99 would be ranked probably in top 3, 4 in the world. And that's not that easy to do in practices, just because, again, the state of mind and the preparation is always different when you're at a competition versus when you're training and you're more tired. But definitely once or twice I did some really special stuff in practices.
So it's 2000. We're at the Sydney Olympics. You've broken world records. You're the world champion. You mention about the snowball effect and being confident. Was there any danger of being overconfident?
It was never a danger overconfident because I never in my career that I feel overconfident because I was always a student of the sport of swimming, and I was always a student of sports in general, and always understood and that on any given day anything is possible. So I never took that for granted. So my preparation never changed. I was always very focused and never took anything for granted. The only thing that starts, sometimes creeps in your mind is the fact that because it's an Olympic year, because you want to do so much, because you want to be so prepared, you're almost afraid to be overtrained, overdo it. What we've seen over the past maybe 7 to 8 years, there's been a lot of studies done on the effects of overtraining and overdoing it and not having enough rest and having a detrimental effect on the performances. Back in the late 90s, 2000, we didn't really talk much about that. So that was a concern. And in fact, I will tell you that 2 months before the games, I lost to Aaron Pearsall at a meet in Los Angeles in July of 2000. And it was for that reason. I was overtrained. My last 50, it was literally 3 seconds slower than, my typical 200 backstroke races. And it was only attributed to the fact that I was overtrained because I knew I was in great shape. I knew I've done all the work. So it was just overdoing it. And that always a concern, especially when you're going into Olympic year.
It's funny, we've interviewed Mahe Drysdale, who's an Olympic champion rower and also the BMX Olympic champion. And both of them were saying they got injuries about 3 to 4 months before the games themselves. So I do wonder if that little break in some ways helped them to stop overtraining, their body relaxes, and then they're able to go at the games properly. It's all very interesting. I guess we'll never know about that.
I would tell you that I think there's a value in that break. I really do. Because it gives the body, it almost recharges the battery.
Yeah, it's interesting. So 2000, you won 3 gold medals. How did you feel when you won the first gold medal? Was it finally my dream has come true, or is it I've got 2 more events to do and I want to win 2 more golds, I want to win 3 gold medals, or a little bit of both, or what else was there?
Well, first, relief. More than anything, it was a relief that I was finally able to win, and then I was an Olympic gold medalist. There was a lot of pressure on me. As you mentioned yourself, I was a favorite going in. I had a tremendous run going back to 97, world champion in 98, 3 world records. People talked about that I simply could not be beat. So all of that definitely played, you're trying to block it out, but it's almost impossible to, block it all out. So yes, that first win was a relief. And I think after I won the first, it was almost easier to do the 200 backstroke and then do the relay, just because I already knew that something that, that I was striving towards for many years was finally achieved. And no one was going to ever take away the fact that I was an Olympic gold medalist. It made for the other 2 races a little bit easier.
So 2001, you decided to skip the World Championships and you competed at the Maccabiah Games in Israel. How was that experience?
That was a very special experience for me. Being Jewish and growing up in a country that we couldn't really talk, is growing up in Soviet Union and not being able to be proud of my heritage. It was definitely a unique experience, than being in Israel and taking part in this global Jewish sporting event. And it was more than just an athletic competition. For me, it was a cultural experience. Being in Israel and being amongst thousands of Jewish athletes was a very life-changing experience that to this day, I still have tremendous memories from, and that I value quite a bit.
Was that the first time you'd been to Israel?
That was the first time I was in Israel, exactly. So there was so many things that were right about that particular year, and skipping the World Championships and going to the Maccabiah.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. So you were then suffering with some injuries, shoulder and knee injuries. How did you cope with that? What changes would you make to your training? Because eventually you still qualified for the 2004 games.
Yeah, unfortunately the years between 2000 and 2004 were not good for me in terms of health. I originally felt uncomfort in the shoulder, I think even before the relay in 2000, but obviously didn't give much thought to it. Just thought that it was just a lot of racing and stress at the games, that it wasn't, a big deal. And then I took a few months off after the 2000 games. And when I came back, the nagging ache in the shoulder continued to persist. And it wasn't until, I guess, spring of 2001 that I had a scan and we realized it was a torn labrum. Obviously, I had plans to go to Israel and compete, and did a couple of European European swim meets in the summer, but ultimately decided that after Israel I would need to have a shoulder surgery. I had that, and then I hurt the knee in 2002, training on a treadmill, just again going all out, running sprints on the treadmill, and accidentally stepped off the treadmill and my knee buckled. And then I re-injured the shoulder again in 2003, basically before Barcelona World Championships, and decided to forego the World Champs so I can have the surgery and have enough time to rehab so I can train for Athens. And then I re-injured the shoulder again in December of 2003. And basically between December of 2003 and April 2004, I only kicked. I didn't even use both of my arms because my shoulder was so bummed.
Did you ever think of not trying to compete, Lenny, when you were going through all those injuries?
I thought about it in early 2004. Yes, I did, because it was such a struggle to stay up mentally. Also knowing that I was already a 3-time Olympic gold medalist, definitely kept popping in my head, why am I doing this? But I've always been someone that follows through on things and didn't want to quit. And again, I that year between 2003 and 4, I changed coaches and went to train with Dave Salo, who coached Aaron for years before Aaron moved on to Texas. And Dave really instilled a lot of confidence in me. He said, Lenny, let's focus on the kick. Let's try to be the best kicker you can be. And with about 100 days to go to Olympic trials, we'll put in some, swimming into it, and let's see what can happen. And, I was fortunate enough to make another Olympic team with all the setbacks. Unfortunately, I don't think I had enough base to be able to carry on another month and then do well in Athens. But I know I did the best that I could. But one thing, if I reflect back on the injuries in all those years between 2000 and 2004, is, unfortunately, I probably should have approached the rehab. I should have been more patient in my rehab and getting into the full training. Just because, you have to be really careful after surgeries and injuries not to re-injure yourself. For me, because I was the best in the world, because I knew everyone, my competitors were gunning for me, I just felt like I was, I was always on the clock. I didn't think I had the time. I didn't think I could be patient enough. So anytime I felt good, I would push it because that's the only way I knew how to do it. And really didn't have people around me to, to put the brakes on me a little bit. And I think that's what I needed it.
So after the Olympics, you retired. How did you come up with that decision? Was it just all the injuries? And how did you make the adjustments? How did that feel?
Definitely all the injuries. I mean, if I would have stayed healthy, I probably would have continued swimming. But injuries definitely, put an end to it. In fact, I will tell you that in 2006, I decided to come back for about because Dave Salo then took over at USC as a head coach, and I loved training with him for that 1 year between 2003 and 2004. He had a completely different approach to training. Instead of volume training, he was all short, really race-paced training. And I really enjoyed that. So in 2006, for about half a year, I decided to come to give it another shot. And then my shoulder started to bother me again. And then I said, that's it. No more attempts. But in terms of the transition, I will tell you that I was pretty fortunate. I planned it even before I retired. I was always pretty entrepreneurial. I had friends that I grew up with, also immigrants from former Soviet Union, that were entrepreneurial. So although I was professional in swimming, I also watched them be successful in the business ventures. And so I started to plan things for myself while I was still competing. And that really helped that transition for me to make it a little easier, because I'm sure you have heard and I'm sure you talked to athletes where it's a pretty eye-opening experience where, you retire as a professional athlete, you've done something for, decades, and all of a sudden you have nothing to go to and you have nothing planned. And it's a pretty tough reality.
The episode we've got out right now, actually, as we do this interview with Annie Vernon, world champion rower, it talks exactly about that difficulty of kind of what do I do tomorrow, and everyone starts putting on a little bit of weight because they're not burning the same amount of calories and everything like that. Well, Lenny, it's been so good to talk to you. It's been really great to get all of your amazing knowledge of what you're now doing with your swim academy and also everything that you achieved in your amazing career. Just before we go, Lenny, why don't you let us know how we can learn more about your swim academy and also any other social media links you might have?
Well, yes, thank you for giving me the opportunity, first of all, to tell my story. And, for people to continue to follow me, they can always go on my website, lennykswim.com. It's a website that is about our swim academy, but it also has links to, my personal social media channels and more about what I'm doing. Again, it's lennykswim.com.
Brilliant. Well, Lenny Krayzelburg, thank you for being on the show and thank you for being the best in the world.
Thank you.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
I mentioned a few other episodes that you can go back and listen to while speaking to Lenny. Maybe go back and listen to the one with the world champion rower Annie Vernon. We've also got a conversation with Brian Clay, the 2008 decathlon Olympic champion. And I did mention a BMX Olympic champion. I don't think I said his name. It is, of course, Connor Fields. Go back and listen to that podcast. Really fun chat with the Las Vegas native. There's also other podcasts with some amazing swimmers. We've got a conversation with Nathan Adrian, Tom Shields, Natalie Coughlin, Stephanie Rice. In fact, I think we've had more swimmers than any other sport on the program, and we've learned a lot from all of them. So go back and listen to them on iTunes. You can do that by going to richardparr.net/iTunes. That's a really quick way to get there. And while you're there, if you get a chance to rate and review the podcast and also subscribe to it, I would really appreciate it. It really helps publicize and help our show grow, which is really good, I think, because I think there's a lot of excellent knowledge here which I would like more and more people to learn from. All right, I've been Richard Parr. You've been listening to The Best in the World. I'll be back next Wednesday with another amazing guest that we can learn from. Until then, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.